No one in the city had ever seen billionaire Richard Calloway cry until the night he sat in a sterile hospital hallway, his hands shaking, eyes red, watching the monitors in his son's room flatline again and again. Every doctor, every specialist, every world's best name he could pay for had failed. His boy Daniel was slipping away. But when hope was dead and the last candle burned out, a stranger walked in from the freezing rain, a homeless girl with no medical degree, no money, and no place to sleep, who claimed she could save him. The next few hours would change every life in that building forever. And if you think you know how this story ends, you don't. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the twists you're about to hear will keep you glued until the very last word. Richard Calloway was not just rich, he was powerful. His name opened doors in New York, his investments influenced governments, and his private plane never touched down anywhere without paparazzi waiting. But all the money in the world meant nothing when his 10-year-old son Daniel collapsed one afternoon at their Hamptons estate. It started as dizziness. Then came fainting spells. Within weeks, the boy was bedridden, trembling, unable to eat without vomiting. Hospitals became their second home. The first diagnosis came from Mount Sinai, rare autoimmune disorder. Then came Johns Hopkins, possible genetic mutation. Richard flew him to Switzerland, Japan, even a secret facility in Dubai. Every doctor gave a new name for the illness. Every treatment failed. And with each passing day, Daniel's skin grew paler, his bones sharper beneath it, his eyes more distant. The boy had always been his mother's joy, but she'd died years earlier in a car accident, leaving Richard to raise him alone. And now, in that cold white hospital room, the last piece of her was fading away. Richard sat in that hallway one December evening, the snow outside falling thick as ash, when Dr. Emerson approached with the kind of face that told him more than words ever could. "We've done all we can," the man said softly, voice cracking, despite years of delivering bad news. "You should prepare." Richard's jaw clenched, his throat a knot. "Prepare," he whispered. "For what?" But he already knew. And for the first time in decades, Richard Calloway broke. Meanwhile, just outside the hospital entrance, the wind tore through the streets like broken glass. A girl no more than 19 huddled beneath the awning, clutching a ragged backpack, her shoes soaked through. Her name was Lila. She'd been on the streets for almost 2 years, drifting between shelters, abandoned warehouses, and subway stations. That night, she'd come to the hospital lobby for warmth. She wasn't there for charity or food. She was there because the hospital cafeteria threw out leftovers at midnight, and she knew how to talk the janitor into letting her have them. She had no reason to notice the tall man in the suit pacing like a caged animal in the hallway, or the way his hands shook as he pressed them to his face. But she did, and she recognized something in his eyes, raw, human desperation, the same look she'd seen in her own reflection the day she lost her little brother to pneumonia in a foster home, when she overheard a nurse whisper about the Calloway boy and no treatment left. Something inside her shifted. She didn't have a degree or a stethoscope. What she had was a memory of a strange old woman she'd met in an alley months earlier, who had taught her remedies passed down from generations of herbal healers in her village. Remedies Leela had once used to ease a dying shelter dog back to life, and to stop an old man's seizures when the ambulance was 20 minutes away. They weren't magic, but they were different, and she knew that if she could just get 5 minutes with the boy, she could try something. It took all of Leela's nerve to walk up to Richard Calloway. Security was everywhere, nurses moving like clockwork. She waited until he turned toward the elevator, then stepped into his path. "I can help your son," she said, voice low but steady. Richard didn't even slow his stride. "You're in my way. Please." She tried again, matching his pace. "Just 5 minutes." That's when he looked at her, properly soaking wet, hair clinging to her face, clothes worn to threads on something, and his eyes hardened. This is not a place for begging. I'm not begging, she shot back. I'm offering security. Moved in. But Richard raised a hand, curiosity flickering beneath his grief. What could you possibly offer that the best doctors in the world couldn't? He asked bitterly. And she told him briefly, without embellishment, about the remedies, about the times she'd seen them work. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to shout. Instead, he stood there, caught between rage and a shred of impossible hope. If you hurt him, I won't, she promised. Against every instinct, Richard allowed her into the room. Daniel lay there, skin nearly translucent, 4 lines running into both arms. Machines hummed like distant bees. Lila moved with a strange calm, pulling from her bag a small pouch of dried herbs and a vial of dark liquid. She asked for hot water, crushed the herbs between her palms, whispered something under her breath that was less a prayer and more a memory. She placed a drop of the liquid on Daniel's tongue, massaged a pressure point behind his ear, then another on his wrist. Nurses muttered about interference, but Richard silenced them with a glare. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. Richard's chest felt hollow, but then Daniel's breathing shifted deeper, steadier. Color touched his cheeks for the first time in weeks. By dawn, the boy's fever had broken. The monitors told a story no doctor could explain: oxygen levels rising, heart rate stabilizing, white blood cell count changing in patterns they hadn't seen before. Dr. Emerson was baffled. Richard was silent, staring at the homeless girl who had done in hours what months of specialists could not. But miracles rarely come without cost. Within days, news leaked to the press. Headlines screamed about the mystery girl who had cured the Calloway heir. TV crews camped outside the hospital. And then the threats started: corporations in the pharmaceutical industry who saw billions slipping away. Medical boards accusing Lila of practicing without a license. And shadowy figures who wanted her secret recipe, no matter the price. Richard moved Lila and Daniel to a private estate in upstate New York. Guarded 24/7. Daniel's recovery continued: walking again, laughing again, living again. But the closer Lila got to the boy, the more Richard noticed the walls she kept around herself. She refused to talk about her past, except for fragments: a drunk stepfather, a brother she couldn't save, nights spent hiding in laundromats. Richard offered her money. She refused. Offered her a job. She hesitated. One night, Daniel woke, screaming not from illness, but from a nightmare of the hospital. Lila sat with him until he fell asleep, and Richard saw, maybe for the first time, that her strength wasn't just in what she could do but in who she was. He began to think of her less as a miracle worker and more as family. But the danger hadn't passed. One rainy evening, men in black SUVs tried to force their way onto the estate. Richard recognized the insignia on one vehiculite, belonged to a private lab he'd once invested in, known for ethically questionable acquisitions. Their goal was clear: take Lila, extract her knowledge. Richard's security fought them off, but the message was clear: they wouldn't stop. The final twist came weeks later, when Dr. Emerson himself visited the estate. He confessed something Richard never expected. Years ago, before she was homeless, Lila had been part of a secret youth program designed to study unexplained healers from impoverished regions. The program had been shut down after ethical violations, and the children scattered. Lila had been the youngest and the only one who escaped. The knowledge she carried wasn't just folk remedy. It was a fusion of old-world tradition and rare physiological ability, something no textbook could teach. In the end, Richard used his power not just to protect her, but to create a foundation in her name, one dedicated to bringing alternative healing to those with nowhere else to turn. And though the world still debated the science of what she did, Daniel didn't care. He was alive. He had his father, and he had Lila, who no longer slept in alleys, but in a room down the hall, where she belonged. Some stories end with answers. This one ended with a promise that sometimes the people the world throws away are the ones who can save it.